Hi back. I am now doing the second part of my video on the Amanda Knox case. I jotted a few notes just to complete the first video. So wanted to clarify, I kept using the word judge when I was talking about a persecutor. And in Italy, apparently the word judge and persecutor, they seem to go hand in hand together. So this Judge Giuliano was also the persecutor that was putting together a persecution case against Amanda Knox. Amanda Knox did not know Kercher for that long. It hadn't been that long that they've known each other. So one of the criticisms they say is that Amanda did not show so much grief, which is also questionable too. But what do they expect, someone who you barely know, the tragedy took place, and are you supposed to be grieving a lot for the loss of someone you don't know? But that incident is very interesting. There's that incident when you clearly, from my perspective, you look at Amanda Knox. She's standing outside of the house while the police and everybody's arriving and starting the investigation. And to me, she's clearly, her facial expression is someone who's scared, sad, and concerned. She looks, you just have to look at her facial expression, and it's very clear to me that she looks sad, scared, sad, and concerned. And it's very clear to me also that Rafael Sollecito, even though he's kissing her on the lips, but he's also patting her on the arm or the shoulders, trying to console her, trying to give her some comfort. And it just blows my mind how anything can be construed as anything. Anything can be interpreted. No matter what you do, something is interpreted the wrong way. It's twisted. So she's not smiling, she's not laughing. She looks sad and distressed. And it is, to me, it's very obvious that Rafael was consoling her. So also wanted to clarify the reason why neither Amanda nor Meredith noticed that there had been an intrusion in the house and there had been a break-in is because the first house, the room that the intruder broke in through, which is clearly Guede, that was the room that was farther down the hallway. So unless you went down the hall and looked into that room, and you didn't have any reason to go down the hallway to somebody else's room, you wouldn't notice that room was completely in disarray. So that was the reason why neither Amanda and very, very possibly Meredith didn't know that there had been an intrusion and a break-in. And also to understand how they knew it was Guede. They knew it was Guede on the break-ins because on the break-in, I think it was on the attorney's office, he also, besides the files, the legal files that he stole, he also stole some office equipment, and he was caught selling it on the black market, and he confessed to it. And then I believe there was some positive identification of him for the other cases. In fact, one of the break-ins apparently was some kind of a school of very young kids. He had broken in, spent the night. It looked like he had spent the night. He made himself at home, ate food, used the bathroom, the toilet, etc. And early that morning, a young woman who worked at the school, I don't know, I think she was one of the teachers perhaps, she had to go inside the room, but she was very fortunate because she went in with two men. I don't know if she had to show something, but she went in with two men, and they found Guede inside. And when they called the police, he had in his bag a sharp knife and some other things in there. But the sharp knives, he was armed with a sharp knife. So they had this history of burglary break-ins, including, I believe, the other one where he was confronted by another man in a different break-in, where he brandished the knife to this man and was ready to fight him. There was probably, I believe there was positive identification of him. But because of this burglary history that he had, the background, they had his fingerprints in file. And that is how they were able to positively identify the fingerprints that were found in Meredith Kercher's purse. Now, to go back, I'm not certain if Meredith had the rent. He was looking for rent money, and that might be the reason why he reached into the purse, into her purse. But it's possible that there was the other lady that had the rent money, and it wasn't in her room. That's why Guede did not find it. He had been adopted, brought from Africa. He had a troubled childhood, obviously, and apparently the parents that had adopted him were at the end of the rope. He was somewhat young, probably about same as all the other ones, in his 20s, but he had this very pernicious tendency to get in trouble. So he looks like he was clearly a sociopath, in the fact that as he was escalating and getting more dangerous, his last crime was to break in, kill Meredith Kercher, and possibly raped her as she was dying, agonizing. So anyway, that is how they found out about Guede, and then of course they had the shoe. Another thing that is very significant and important about Guede is that the way to get him back from Germany, I believe they used one of the guys that knew him, and the guy got him on the phone, and they were recording the conversations with Guede. So, just so you know, not all parts of the police, some parts were working. They were working. And those are the parts that found the DNA, and the parts that then tried to bring him back from Germany. So anyway, in the conversation, it was actually asked. And before everything exploded and everything, Guede was asked about Amanda Knox involvement, because I think he confessed, and he said that Amanda Knox had nothing to do with it. Later, as things progress, and you saw with Chris Watts, that people start to change their story. Later, he introduced that he saw the silhouette of a woman, and he made up that was Amanda running away. The story kept changing and changing and changing. But at the end, what the prosecutor was trying to formulate against Amanda Knox and Rafael Sollecito was what I call outlandish, fantastic inventions, because there was nothing that really backed up those assertions. If Guede fled to Germany that night after that happened, why didn't Amanda and Rafael flee with him? Oh, anybody could say, well, they were certain that they wouldn't be cut, but there was nothing, and Amanda's alibi was Rafael. The only reason Rafael did not serve as an alibi, that's a dove, is because, if you can hear it, is because he would not change his story. He stood by his testimony that Amanda had been with him all night long. So when that didn't work and they couldn't get him to back down on that story, then they threw him into the pile. And then all of a sudden, very strangely, his DNA showed up on a clasp, on a minuscule thing of Meredith's bra in that room. But it was days or weeks later. It wasn't there originally. But they never found Amanda's DNA in that room. And to have had, there wasn't 3 people, it was 4 people that they would have counted in that tiny room doing who knows what. So no, like they say, the simplest, and some people say reality, what do they say? Sometimes reality is more bizarre than fiction. In this case, it's not. Fiction is more bizarre than the reality. The reality was a very simple explanation. It was a botched burglary that went wrong. The person walked, which was bound to happen. This was bound to happen because there had been several burglaries by this guy where people had walked in on him, and he either brandished a knife or, he didn't care to be confronted. He was ready to confront back. And so I think it was a matter of time when this was going to end up with someone dead. And it happened, unfortunately, to this young woman. So I like to talk about confessions and false confessions. Amanda Knox was interrogated gruesomely for hours and hours without food, without bathroom breaks, she asked several times. She did ask for a translator. It was denied to her. In the United States, most of that, almost all of it, would have been considered unconstitutional. They speak about fair trials, that you're in the United States, you have a right to a fair trial. And you have rights. But anyway, she was grilled for hours without a translator. So I believe that just like with prisoners of war and anything else, you can break people down. People can break. And that is what happened. She broke down. And within hours after she finally was able to go to the bathroom and she was able to gather her thoughts, she immediately recanted that confession. She didn't stay by it. And the confession was not handwritten by her. It wasn't her handwriting. Somebody wrote it, and what she did was she signed it. And in that process, you can tell that it's a wrong, it's a false confession for starters, because in her confession she implicated her boss, the black man that was her boss at the bar where she waited tables. So they made it into that. I'm trying to remember if it was because they knew there was a black man involved, and there may have been people that might have known, given Guede's mode of action and the way this crime had happened. But anyway, so she said she had made a mistake. She recanted that confession. And yes, people do break under tremendous stress. They will break down, and especially if it's a young 20-year-old woman who's scared out of her wits. And she was lied so many times in so many ways. She was lied. She was told that Rafael had gone back. It said that Rafael had said that she wasn't with him that night. And that was a lie that was said to her. And while she was in prison, she ended up spending 4 years in a foreign prison. 4 years in a foreign prison in Italy. She was also told, she was lied, and she was told that she had HIV, that she had contracted HIV. And out of a good conscience, then she was asked to write down all the people that she had been in bed with. Imagine if you go through these things, being innocent also. And it turned out that it was a lie. She didn't have HIV. So she didn't have a reason to be put through that. And there was all kinds of other humiliations that she had to go through. The phones. So going back to what happened that night, when the police came to check on Meredith Kercher and they found her dead body in her room, that same morning someone had informed the police that they found some cell phones in their garden, and it was like feet away from the cottage where Meredith Kercher lived, and it turned out to be Meredith's phone. Meredith had been on the phone with her mother. I think she was on her phone. She was talking with her mother. There was a conversation, and either she finished the conversation and then got killed, or she may have gotten surprised right in the middle of the conversation with her mother. She was calling her mother in England. And the phones, so what is believed is that Guede did not find money, but grabbed the phones and went with the phones and dropped them as he was fleeing. I wanted to also finish up then now with part 2, that just like we've seen with Chris Watts, when these sorts of things happen, we get like 2 camps, and then we get these campaigns. I'm not so sure if the families are involved in these campaigns or other people are involved. The Italians, you know, they wanted to be right about this, and this guy, Giuliano, I'm not so sure who all starts these campaigns, but they use social media to do these campaigns. And so the campaign, for instance, in Facebook, there was a campaign, a tremendous campaign, trying to convince everybody that Amanda Knox is guilty. Along those lines, I'm going to add also one more thing about this body language experts that are out there. It is true that you will see in my eyes sometimes, if I'm trying to remember something, I may look up or look to the side or look to the left. And it is true that sometimes you might look to one direction to remember or recall something. You look up to try to put things together. And there's all these facial expressions. But it's also subjective how a person interprets these things. So there's nothing objective about these body language interpretation. There's nothing thoroughly scientific about it. It's just hogwash to a certain extent. And so they say, well, the lip curved this way. Sometimes when I'm talking here, I go, you know. And we make facial expressions. Not always 100% of the time our facial expressions are congruent with what we're saying. I tend to disagree. For instance, I have watched now a couple of what I call, I don't know what to call them, but they're facial expression experts that assert that they know that Amanda Knox is lying. Amanda Knox is a very difficult person to read, I think. It's somewhat not easy, because she is a little different, and everybody's an individual, everybody's different. So I would not like to be in that place of people dissecting my every little eye movement or little cringe in the corner of my mouth or anything like that. It's different when if you actually effectively see someone really laughing, or even on laughing. I have laughed out of nervousness. One time my sister was confronting me. She was fighting with me. I was at the top of the stairs and she was getting really angry, and all of a sudden I bursted in laughter, and it was all just nervousness. So I don't even think that body expert language is even admissible in court, because it is hogwash. It's very subject to interpretation, therefore it's subjective. There's nothing objective and scientific about that. So when you see the so-called expert on YouTube saying that they know that they know what is in Amanda Knox's mind, just take it with a grain of salt. Take it for what it is. you don't have a way of knowing what's in someone's mind. And Dr. Guede, I really like his videos, and I like quoting him. He has a video on this body language or neurolinguistic things, and he also is saying that there isn't very much scientific about that. But going back to the campaigns, so there was this campaign against Amanda Knox in trying to convince the public of her guilt, and we don't know to what extent is the family, of course, Meredith Kercher's family has been very heartbroken, and it's, you know, it's easy to believe that, you know, to just simply say somebody's guilty because you're in pain and you're hurting and you have lost a daughter and a sister. So it is, some people believe, we don't know this, that her brother was also mounting a lot of that. But because of that, as a result of that, many of us that have been very convinced of her innocence, my whole thing is there's no DNA in that room. That was my starting point, and I stuck to that. That to me, just impossible that she could be involved in a murder. Especially they try to make it that it was spontaneous and things like that. So a group of us, I stumbled upon a group on Facebook, and we all try to counteract the negative publicity. And we were not paid people. Sometimes when you find negative publicity, you might even find people that are hired to do these kind of hit jobs, like PR hit jobs. Amanda Knox had to hire, her family hired, publicity campaign experts because it was necessary to give the case publicity, and that's what some people have had to do. In case of, for instance, Farias, this guy from, I think it was Alabama, who was wrongfully convicted. You couldn't believe it. He had an airtight alibi, and he was still wrongfully convicted for the death of his wife. If it wasn't for a TV show that came out where the TV channel picked up on the story and they started exposing all the errors and all the wrong things that were with this trial. If it wasn't for that, he would still be in jail. So anyway, Amanda Knox family it was fortunate that Amanda had a very loving and insisting family that was not giving up on her. She finally was able to be freed up. So anyway, a group of us, we, out of concern, and we didn't get paid for any of this, we got very involved on Facebook. And as a result of that, I got to meet Amanda Knox very briefly, very, very briefly. I have a picture with her, a little selfie, but we all met in Salt Lake City, and there was like 100 of us, maybe 75 people or 100. People came from all over the world. Some people came from England. And then she came and stopped by at Salty's where we were gathering and said hello to everybody very briefly, and then she went on. But these are traumatic experiences to have to go through something like this, because they have people like this guy, this Giuliano, who threatened Douglas Preston. So if you're interested in really knowing more about that background, do a Google search on the monster. You do a YouTube search also, Monster of Florence, and you can find out Douglas Preston talking about his experience with this man. And everything else seems to be factual. The fact that Guede had broken into an attorney's office, I think he confessed to that when he was caught. And all that was missing, besides a couple, there may have been a couple of company equipment, but it was very peculiar that some office files as well, legal files, had disappeared. So I don't know. I don't know if I can convince you. I have my own conviction, in the United States, you're innocent until proven guilty. Lately, it seems like with everything else, they want to make everyone guilty until proven innocent, including some political scenarios that are happening. You never have to prove you're innocent. Any persecution has to prove their case that you are guilty. That's the model for the United States, and there is a good reasons for that, because people's liberties are important in the system. We have a really good Constitution and a good Bill of Rights, which are precious. They're under attack all the time. They're timeless. People want to say that they're outdated. No, that's why we have such a good place to live here in the United States, because we have freedoms, we have liberties, and we have rights protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as well. And we have a very good legal system where you are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case of Amanda Knox, there was just no proof. They made up things, but everything, in my perception, it was pretty outlandish. And like I said, the simplest explanation, which was a botched burglary from a guy that had been burglarizing homes and places, is really what happened. And you'll find the experts. There was a judge here in the United States who Amanda Knox used to babysit for him, and he didn't even think about it until his own daughter said, she's innocent, there's no way she could have done this. So the judge got some interest, and he gathered a lot of information, and then a lot of people realized everything that was wrong with his case. This guy Guede, how long has it been? He got only 20 years. He got off with just 20 years. And in Italy, I guess they get a chance to go out of the prison, like after a certain amount of time, for little outings. But all the beef has been with Amanda and with perhaps Rafael, but mostly even more just with Amanda, more than so with Rafael. Then with Guede, whose semen was at the murder scene, whose bloody fingerprints were on Meredith Kercher's purse, whose shoe print was everywhere. So we live in a strange world, and hopefully we all get our heads screwed on better, so that I'm not saying that people who believe different than me don't have their heads right. I'm just saying in general, fairness has to be fairness, and hopefully we all get more clarity. I'm hoping for myself. I get confused at times, and I pray to God that we can all just have really good clarity and clear thinking rather than wrong thinking, wrong thought. Okay, this is a very nice pond. Let's see if I can get it there. There's ducks. It's really pretty. So I apologize for the scuffle while driving. My camera fell out a couple times the way I had it. You have a very nice evening. Take care.